I'm going to ask you, Dave, about historic events overnight, but let me ask you about super. Do you agree with James Campbell there?
Look, I didn't hear everything that James was saying. Sorry, Laura, but I
Well, we
would say
basically
that,
said the super system is a tax haven for some people on high income.
well, look, I'd say a few things. Firstly, I think it's good that Labor has announced these changes. It's a huge backflip. It's an embarrassment for Jim Chalmers, but I think particularly the tax on unrealised gains was going to have a whole lot of unintended and adverse consequences for us. The second thing I'd say, though, that yes, as a matter of principle, superannuation is to provide security for people in retirement. It is not meant to be a tax-effective intergenerational wealth transfer vehicle. Now, that said, I think there have been far too many changes to the superannuation system in recent years, and Labor is now proposing another set of changes. We need to stop shifting the goalposts every time, we have another bright idea, because people are trying to make long-term planning decisions, for decades hence in the superannuation system, and we need to give them the certainty to do that.
Okay, is there a chance that the coalition, after you see the details of this new package of reform that doesn't use tax unrealised gains and is indexed and really targets people with super accounts with more than $10 million, is there a chance that you could support this in the Senate and deal the Greens right out of relevancy?
Look, we'll study the proposals carefully. I think that the fact that unrealised gains are no longer going to be taxed, the fact that there's indexation now of where this tax kicks in, they're both positive, but I think we still need to study the proposal in some detail because there's a lot of changes that have been announced in the press conference yesterday. This policy now looks nothing like what was taken by Labor to the last election, which we opposed. So we'll do a good faith examination of it. And, I think we have an open mind on this.
Okay, it's not a no. Dave Sharma, good to know. Let's talk about events in Israel overnight. How did you feel when you saw those 20 hostages, all men, finally arrive home? And then we've seen video after video of them being embraced by their loving families after a very long 2 years.
Look, I think it was a really happy and joyful occasion to see those 20 released. Look, many of whom their families thought they would never see alive again, and having been held for over 2 years now in captivity in frankly brutal and barbaric conditions, it's a miracle that some of them survived. I do also think, though, that, of the 250 people that were taken hostage on that day, about 100, have not returned alive, and Hamas is still holding the bodies of others. So whilst I certainly share in the joy and the elation of those families, I'm also thinking about those whose loved ones are never going to return.
What about Trump's claim of peace for the first time in the Middle East for 3,000 years?
Well, look, Donald Trump likes a bit of hyperbole when he speaks, and that's one of his character traits. But I do think this is a very positive step forward. The last 2 years have seen some of the most turmoil and the worst loss of life and the most civilian suffering in the Middle East in decades. And bear in mind, this is a region that is not known for tranquility. There have been a lot of disruption, a lot of turmoil, a lot of war. The fact that has now at least been brought to a pause and hopefully an end is undoubtedly a very positive thing. And Donald Trump and the US administration deserve immense credit for that. They have really been the architects and the prime drivers of the ceasefire, the hostage release, and hopefully the building blocks to a broader peace in the Middle East.
What's the next building block, do you think?
I think the next building block is to get an alternative form of governance into Gaza and make sure that Hamas is no longer playing a role there. And then if that's the case, then the international community will have the confidence to invest in Gaza's reconstruction. The Arab world will have the confidence to put in security forces that will be needed to guarantee law and order. And Israel will have the confidence to provide more freedom and autonomy to the Palestinian population in Gaza. But I think that's the first step, that every country that was in Sharm el-Sheikh yesterday wants to make sure that Hamas is gone from the scene, cannot do this again, and cannot exercise the terrorist stranglehold it has over the people of Gaza for the past 20 years.
Yeah, you mentioned Sharm el-Sheikh and the number of countries that there. I don't think Australia was represented. Is that unusual?
No.
Should we have been there?
Look, normally Middle East peace conferences in the past, Australia would have been represented. We might not have been in the first tier of nations, but we'd certainly be amongst that group of nations. And bear in mind, historically, Australia has contributed to security in the Middle East, whether it's contribution to the fight against Islamic State. We've still got peacekeepers serving in the Sinai Peninsula to enforce or monitor the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. But I think the fact that we weren't there in Sharm el-Sheikh just shows you how much this government, with its feckless grandstanding, has dealt us out of relevance.
Why
in the Middle East.
Did you have to be invited? Because I'm looking at the list of countries other than the obvious ones. We're talking Cyprus, Canada, Greece, Hungary, Japan, the Netherlands, Norway, Paraguay, Spain. Why wouldn't we have been there?
Well, because we weren't invited. That's why. That's my obvious conclusion. If we were invited, I think we would have certainly sent a representative. And I think it's because, frankly, we're not seen by the US as a constructive partner in the Middle East, and we're not seen by the countries in the Middle East, not just Israel, but the Gulf Arab states, Egypt and Jordan. They don't think we've played a serious role here. I mean, all of these countries have basically been exerting diplomatic and military pressure on Hamas over these past few months to get them to this point. Australia, our policy has been applauded by Hamas. Hamas has taken encouragement from Australian policy, and I think that tells you about the very unusual, unconventional and frankly appalling stance we seem to have arrived at under this Labor government.
Well, let's end on a positive and celebrate what an historic day this is as well, to see those 20 hostages home. It's great to talk to you, Dave. It's been a long 2 years, of course. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Laura.